In the West where I live, most of the people that we meet, especially African Americans, they don't even know their fathers. They don't even know their fathers. It was all of them, most of them were the product of one night stand. One night stand. They will tell you, I don't know my father. Well, who named you? Whose name are you carrying? Well, my mother chose his name for me. I don't know. Is that what we want for our ummah? No. كلهم أو معظمهم أبناء الزنا. أبناء الزنا. Why? Because man, he has to give up the seed. And because the marriage will limit them, they will go from one to another to a third. You know, subhanallah, it's one of the African American brother who accepted Islam. He said, Sheikh, Islam limited me. Only allowed me 4 wives. He said, before I became a Muslim, I had 40 girls, mashallah, tabarakallah. And I used to maintain all of them well, tabarakallah. But he said, now Islam is limiting me only to 4. So children will be well taken care of. And there won't be children who do not know their fathers. أقول ما تسمعون استغفر الله لك فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم.
Let me just enter into this conversation with a dua that Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala made. I think it's very pertinent at this point. Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, Allahumma man kana ala hawa أو على رأي وهو يظن أنه على الحق وليس هو على الحق فرده إلى الحق حتى لا يضل من هذه الأمة أحدا. Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, Oh Allah, listen to his dua. He said, Oh Allah, man kana ala hawa, whoever is upon the path of following his own desires. Aw ala ra'yin, or he holds an opinion that is antithetic to the truth. وَهُوَ يَظُنُّهُ عَلَى الْحَقِّ, and he believes that he is upon the truth. فَرُدَّهُ إِلَى الْحَقِّ, he believes that he is upon the truth. وَلَيْسَ هُوَ عَلَى الْحَقِّ, but he's not upon the truth. فَرُدَّهُ إِلَى الْحَقِّ, return him back to the truth. حَتَّى لَا يُضِلَّ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ أَحَدًا, so that he does not lead anyone astray from our ummah. And this khutbah was written to, some of the deviant groups. This was an introduction to what he was getting ready to say in his dealing with, the different groups, the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the different groups during that time. And you can see that the sincerity that although I'm about to spank you, you know what I mean? Like, although I'm about to spank your behind, but I also want you to be guided right. I do want guidance for you. As it's as someone myself who has been under public scrutiny, at a particular time in my life, there's a sensitivity that I do have to Sheikh Saeed. There is a sensitivity that I have, and I know exactly what he's experiencing right now. I know exactly what he is going through right now. I've been there. I know exactly how that feels, although in his situation is a little different. His was warranted. Mine was, just some group of, ignoramuses that had an agenda. And I just happened to be the pawn to, get them to their next position. Nonetheless, I know what it feels like. So, while there is a part of me that is, pretty, upset with the fact that, he had the audacity to utter what he uttered on Jumu'ah. You know what I mean? The best day of the week in the best place on earth, which is the Masjid. You know what I mean? And you speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures, the best of mankind. Like, you on the best day of the week, you in the best place on earth, speaking to the best of mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, aware servants. You know what I mean? And then you drop the ball completely, rather than serving, them, you took an opportunity to throw an entire race of people, under the bus, just to kind of, for your own agenda. And we'll get to that. Nonetheless, Imam Ahmed said, Oh Allah, Whoever is upon a path of following their desires or holding an opinion that is antithetic to the truth, while he believes that he is upon the truth, but he is not upon the truth, return him to the truth so that he does not lead anyone from our ummah astray. And I'll supplement that with another dua. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa wa rizukna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan wa rizukna ijtinaba. Oh Allah, so show us the truth as it is and give us the ability to follow it, and show us falsehood as it is and give us the ability to stay away from it. You meant every word that you said. Because then you followed it up. Like, it's not like you said it and then you kind of, as your mind is going, you kind of recognize, like, wow, I kind of went too far. But a mistake, a mistake is saying Allah said, but it was actually a hadith. Or saying the Prophet ﷺ said, and it was actually an ayah from the Quran. That's a mistake. Saying that the vast majority, he said all, kulluhum, aw mu'adhamahum, all of them, rather some of them, most of them are born out of, fornication and adultery. That's not a mistake. And then you followed it up with an example of a convert from the African American community to add insult to injury, right? You followed it up with an example, you understand, to justify and to validate your point. You further validated your point, which meant that every word that came out of your mouth, you meant. So why are you apologizing? Just stand in your discomfort. Just stand in your discomfort. Like, all right, the pressure's on. You offended a whole race of people, a whole nation of people that are connected to other, nations and other races. And now the pressure is on you. Stand in that discomfort. Those were your words. Own it. Say, that's how I felt. That's how I feel. Now, if you guys can bring me some information that can bring me some clarity about what I said, then I'm open for a discussion. And, quiet is kept. Shout out to Brother Moon for all of you who said, oh, why didn't you talk to the brother on the side? Or why didn't you, why are you, embarrassing him? Or why are you doing this out in public? I reached out to Sheikh Saeed for all of you who would like to know. I reached out to him. So you can save all of that. Like, what kills me, and shout out to Brother Gaddith. He said something that was profound, something that was sent to me. He said that if it was an African American who had said the same exact thing to about a Somali culture, or about any other culture, we would have been dragged through the ringer, public apology or not. And there is a double standard. I want you guys to understand that. For those of you who are listening who are not African Americans, you guys function with a double standard. There's certain rules that apply to certain people that don't apply to others. Because if I would have said that, or I would have been drunk through the ringer. Shadid Muhammad, we would have never heard the last of it. And then, but the fact of the matter is that you followed it up with an example of an African American who converted to Islam, and then he had 40 girls, 40, like come on, man, like that's an exaggeration. You embellished the story. Wallahu a'lam whether that even happened. You know what I mean? Wallahu a'lam whether that story even has any relevance, because at this point, everything that comes out of your mouth is questionable. All we're doing right now is clarifying, not just to the Somali community, because even to the African Americans, we got some self-hating Negroes amongst us, that I'm scrolling through some of the comments and I see African Americans saying, well, I don't see what he said was wrong. It's the truth. Most of us were born from Zina. It's like, God damn it. Are you serious? Are you really serious? You really going to sit here and co-sign that bullcrap? You going to really sit here and say, I don't see what the problem is. Most African Americans are born from Zina. Are you freaking kidding me, man? How much self-hatred does it take to create Negroes like you? Self-hating. And in the words of Malcolm, man, who taught you to hate yourself, man? From the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. Who taught you to hate yourself? Are you serious? Don't you know where they get the statistics from? It's connected to a system that has been designed to socially marginalize us completely. and shape the way that the world sees us. I mean, like, are you kidding me, man? Can't make this stuff up. So this is not about just the Somali community, because I think y'all need to be educated. Some of y'all need to be educated. I'm gonna take you to school today. You're gonna get a history lesson today. But some of these self-hating African Americans, they need to be taken to school as well. And if there are any Arabs or Indo-Pacs that are listening, that they need to listen to this too, you're gonna get a whole lesson today too. All right. So the fact of the matter is that you meant what you said. You meant what you said, and that's okay. There is an Islamic context for this, meaning saying something out of your mouth, but harboring something deeper behind the words. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ بَدَتِ الْبَغْضَاءُ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِهِمْ وَمَا تُخْفِي صُدُورُهُمْ أَكْبَرُ. That hatred has appeared on their tongues, but what their hearts conceal is far worse. Meaning, there are deeper implications behind words. And what Sheikh Saeed said, although it rubbed you the wrong way as it relates to what he said, apparently, the implications of his words are even worse. What he implied is far worse. Meaning, sometimes an individual can express a thought out loud, but what they harbor in their hearts is far worse than what they have said. They didn't express the true nature of how they felt, because sometimes words you can't really express how you really feel. But we can tell by the implications of your words that you meant more than what you said. All right. And this brings me to my point of the discussion today with respect to what was said by Sheikh Saeed during his khutbah regarding African Americans as a whole, because he didn't leave much room for erring on the side of caution. He didn't err on the side of caution. He said all of them, most of them. And I don't know where you got that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where you got that statistics, or whether it was just coming from a place, because he didn't quote any statistics. So the only other thing that I can think of is that, you have bought into the stereotypes about African Americans, or this is something that you just kind of felt deep down inside within yourself, right? Nonetheless, his statement, although troublesome, to say the least, is not as much of a concern for me and many African Americans as it's troublesome and it's grossly inaccurate, but that's not the troublesome part. It's not as much of a concern as the driving force behind the actual comment. You know what I mean? I'm not one for minoring in the major and majoring in the minor, so I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time dwelling on the inaccuracies of what he said. I'm not even going there. If anybody is listening right now who believes that most African Americans were born out of zina, you need to just log off, sign off, and go, go educate yourself. I'm not even, I'm not even dealing with that. All right, as they say, al-ma'ruf la yu'arraf. Something that is known doesn't have to be explained. I'm not even dwelling on that. So as for the first comment that Sheikh Saeed made, he said most African Americans don't even know who their fathers are. That was his comment. Most African Americans don't even know who their fathers are. Okay. Albeit, there are plenty African Americans who don't know who their fathers are. Plenty African Americans who don't know who their fathers are. Just like there are plenty whites that don't know who their fathers are. There are plenty Hispanics that don't know who their fathers are. There are plenty Somalis who don't know who their fathers are. Am I lying? Am I lying? So you mean to tell me everyone in the Somali community, from Minnesota to California to Atlanta to Canada, the projects in Canada, don't you know that they have a project in Canada that is predominantly populated by Somalis? So are you telling me that everyone in that project knows who their father is? There's no zina. A lot of the Somali women, unfortunately, I mean, we have to have this discussion. There's high rates of prostitution among Somali women in places like Atlanta and other places. Are you telling me all of the children, Somali children, know who their fathers are? Are you serious? I find that very hard to believe. I find that very hard to believe.
Wallahi, you guys don't know the stuff I've seen with girls. Like, we would leave the club or whatever, and she would leave with any random guy because she knows she can't go home drunk. There's girls out here blacked out off Xanax getting raped, and they can't even tell their mom because they're gonna get snapped on. Imagine being raped and not being able to tell nobody because you're gonna get blamed for being raped. No. There's a lot happening to the girls, and you guys need to talk about it. A lot. Like, we're Bani Adam too, we're human beings, like, we fell into the trap of this life. It happens. We're not bad people. I guess you could say I was like a functioning addict. Like, I thought I was okay. I had a house, I had a job. Like, I was doing what I had to do. But eventually, it all comes to an end because it's deeper than the drug, It's in our soul. Something, and we're trying to fill that void. And that void it comes from home. Communication. Talk to your kids. Like, not habar them, not kick them out. Like, understand them. Like, it's fahma. We grew up in two different worlds. You guys grew up in Africa. We grew up here. It's temptations. You want to fit in. Now that I'm older, I regret a lot of stuff. When I was younger, I thought I was fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with smoking weed. The first time I knew something was wrong is when I went and spent my own money to buy pills. But it didn't stop me. It only got worse. Like you said, I had a $200 habit a day. Imagine, and take a can of $200 every day. You're gonna become a criminal. You're gonna steal. You're gonna do stuff. Because if you don't get that drug, you're gonna be sick. You're gonna be on the toilet throwing up and shitting on yourself, literally. You think any Bani Adam's gonna sit there and do that? No, you're gonna go get your fix. We don't talk about problems in our community. If a girl gets touched by an uncle or something or whatever, does she go talk to her family? No. She just knows when she's 14 or 15, oh, I hit this blunt. That feels good. I'm gonna keep doing that. Because once you do that, that negative feeling in your heart stops. So you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And then you're just gonna see you're lost in it. And when I say lost, I swear to God, it's just that. You feel so lost. But at a certain point, you gotta love yourself. You gotta love your mom. When I think about how much pain I caused my mom, it just makes me cry till this day. Well, I have the best mom in the world, but yet I caused her so much heartache. Would any of you do something that you have 50-50 chance of doing it? You wouldn't, right? If you're gonna die, you wouldn't. So what do you think is hurting these kids so bad that they're taking that risk just for a moment to be high? They know they could die, but they still do it. That's pain. They have that much pain in their heart. They probably low-key want to die. When I was in my addiction, when I woke up certain mornings, that's how I felt. Ilahi, just kill me, because I'm useless, I'm kasaro. That's really how I felt. I used to wake up and be like, why am I still alive?
Even those of you who have your biological father in your house, many of you still don't even know who your fathers are due to the, emotional unavailability of your father, the physically detached father who's there physically, but emotionally somewhere else. You never really had a conversation. And, maybe perhaps this will explain why, a lot of Somali boys join gangs. They turn to a life of crime. And a lot of Somali girls, start hustling for validation by removing their hijab, bleaching their skin, taking off their hijab for likes and all of these things. Perhaps that's as a result of an absent father. You understand? And, I'm not, throwing, Somalis under the bus. I just want Sheikh Saeed to understand that, what you said was, very unilateral. You took a very unilateral approach, to addressing social issues. And if social issues are not your thing, then you would probably do better not even discussing social issues in your khutbahs or in your lectures, period, until you educate yourself. until you educate yourself. I mean, like, we're like Sheikh Saeed is not, you know what I mean, like a fresh graduate from an Islamic university. You just graduated yesterday. You 50 something years old. You have been mounting the minbars since I was a new shahada. I remember when the first khutbah I ever heard of his, he gave a khutbah in East Orange, New Jersey. Abu Muslim let him come to the masjid and give a khutbah. And this was like in 2000, 99, 2000. That was the first time I ever heard of him. So you have been giving khutbahs at bare minimum for the past 25, almost 30 years of your life. You don't get a pass. You don't get oh, nobody reached out to me. Like, I did reach out to you. I text you. You text me back and you said, oh, I'm at the hospital. I'll give you a call. I said, yes, I'll be waiting for your call. You never called all the way up. And this was yesterday. I still never heard from you. No call back. Brother Shadid, not that you owed me a phone call, but at least I extended myself to you. Thank you, Brother Matmoon, for giving me his number. I at least reached out to you. So for all of you, excuse makers, always you got so many excuses for people that you love. But the people that you don't give a damn about, you don't make not one excuse, because it had it been me that did that, it would have been, oh, Shadid Muhammad hates Somalis, he dislikes this, dislikes that. No excuses. But when it comes to people that you love and that you care for, you're going to make every single excuse in the book. So take this and put it in your pipe and do whatever you want to do with it. I reached out to him, so nobody can say, oh, you putting him on blast in public and you never even reached out to him. I'm not that person. I'm not that person. If anything, and anybody who knows my track record, out of everybody, I have always followed the rules. Nobody follows the rules when it comes to me, and that's cool, because that's true. That's how you choose to deal with things. But I follow the rules of Islam. At first, I was like, nah, I'm not reaching out to him. And then when I saw his apology, I was like, no, I have to. It is a must that I speak to this man personally, because that apology was not an apology. It was a response. It was a response to public pressure. It was not an apology. Anyway, absentee dads is the actual term to say, oh, there's a whole great group of people, whole race of people who don't know their fathers, is very dismissive, very disrespectful, very insensitive. All right. Do you know what it's like to you probably don't, Sheikh Saeed. And many of you out of Pakistani, maybe many of you grew up with your fathers, you know what I mean? And although your father was there, he beat you half of the time. The other half of the time he's yelling at you, right? The other half of the time he's asleep or, out doing whatever he's doing. For all of the cultures who believe that African-American dads are just somehow missing for no reason other than the fact that these are just lazy and they don't want to take care of their children. Do you know what it's like to grow up without a father? And then to have you go on the minbar in a very insensitive manner say, oh, most of them don't even know who their fathers are. If you were to ask them, who's your father, they would say, I don't know where my father is. Like, you playing with a very sensitive issue. There are grown men right now who did not grow up with their fathers that are still reconciling issues from their childhood due to not having their fathers around. Do you know what that's like? Obviously you don't, because if you did, you probably wouldn't have uttered such a callous comment. Do you know what it's like not to grow up with a father? Do you know what that feels like? And to get on a minbar and mention that in such a callous way, in such a non-regarding way, didn't the Prophet ﷺ say, "Inna rajul la yatakallama bi kalimatin la yulqi laha balan wa yahwi biha fi an-nari ab'ad min 70 kharifa." Then the Prophet ﷺ said that perhaps a man may utter a word, yatakallama bi kalima, speak a word, la yulqi laha balan, and he will not even pay attention to the seriousness of what he's saying, and it will land him in the hellfire the distance of 70 years. Just one kalima, one sentence. And here you are falling into that. One sentence. You get on the minbar and you mention just in such a insensitive way. Most of them don't even know who their fathers are. If you were to ask them who is their fathers, they wouldn't even be able to tell you who their fathers are. And it's just like, yeah, but you got people, you don't need to reach out to African-American community and use us as the validation for your comment. You could have used your own community. There are Somalis that don't even know who their fathers are. Somali girls who their fathers have never once told them, I love you, you're beautiful. Otherwise, she would never feel the need to remove her hijab. She would never feel the need to put up makeup on her face and to display herself like a woman who has self-hatred, as a woman who is searching for validation from anybody outside of herself. She would never feel the need to do that. So don't talk about absentee fathers. Talk about absentee fathers in your own damn culture. You gotta be kidding me. So now all of a sudden, African American culture, we now become the scapegoat. We now become the go-to whenever you want to talk about some degenerate, low-life behavior, as if other cultures don't have the same thing. Gotta be kidding me, man. Absentee dads, Sheikh Saeed, let me just say this, as well as all of the others who believe, people who are born and they don't have their fathers. First of all, Prophet Muhammad SAW never met his father. So you want to talk about somebody who grew up without a father. Let's start with your last prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that was an honor for him. That was an honor for him because he was going to go through life and gain the lessons that his father could have given him so easily. But he's now going to learn those lessons in a more difficult and a more challenging way, which builds character. Struggle builds character. You understand? Me not growing up with my father, I don't think that I would have become the man that I would have become if my father was in my life. I look at my boys and I look at my children, we just grew up differently. I don't want to say anything bad about my boys, but we're different. Let's just say that. We're different. We grew up differently. You know what I mean? Things that they are sensitive to are things that were nothing to me. You know what I mean? But that's the difference between growing up with a father and having that cushion versus not having a father and have to go out in the world and get all of your lessons out in the world. Struggle builds character, and I respect that. We don't look down on stuff like that, especially not when the legacy of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, he started his life off not knowing his father. And then you have the audacity to get on the minbar and make mockery of a whole entire race of people who you claim did not grow up knowing their fathers, as if there's some type of shame in that. Is shame in that? It's honor in that. I'm not honoring the fact that the fathers are not there because absentee dads exist in every culture. You know what I mean? And for many different reasons. We can't just shame a whole group of people because they grew up without their fathers. You don't know what that person's why is. You don't know what their condition was. You don't know what their situation was. Don't you know that? Let me give you another history lesson. Don't you know that during the Ronald Reagan, presidential campaign, he used the war on drugs, which was actually a war on the black family, Hamza Yusuf, a war on the black family under the guise of the war on drugs. He ran his entire campaign on the war on drugs, which was in fact a war on the black family, namely the black man and the family. They always go after the black man, the buck. They always go after the black man. You understand? He ran his entire campaign off of the war on drugs, which was in fact the war on the black family, namely the black fathers. So while, in the 1980s, Somalia was in a civil war with, tribal war with others and a border war with Ethiopians killing each other willingly, we were here in America being plotted on by our own government. Did you know that? We were here being plotted on by our own government. Imprisoned, addicted to drugs, and watching our women, sell us out for, or not necessarily sell us out, but choose, welfare and government assistance over our fathers. Many of us, our mothers had to choose. Because if you wanted government assistance, if you wanted welfare, you wanted government assistance, there could be no man in the house. And unfortunately, many of these women had children, and they had to think about those children. So they could not put down that they were married. They could not put down that there was a man in the house. And the man could not be around when, the government workers came by to check on the house. They usually, wallah al-azim, they used to come around to make sure no black man was in the house. No man was in the house. You understand? It was a war on the black family. under the guise of a war on drugs. And then here you go migrating to America in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and you have the audacity to look at black people and say, oh, the breakdown of the black family, or, this, look at them, they're animals, they're savages, and you don't even understand the history. We are a group of people who our government has always been plotting on us from the day that we arrived at the shores of North America. That's a history lesson for you. For all of you guys thinking that, our fathers are just disappeared. Many of our fathers were addicted to drugs. Drugs that they pushed into our community to increase the police force, because the Irish were the police officers, the Italians, the Irish. All right, the Italians ran the cocaine business. The Irish ran the police business, and they turn a blind eye, let the drugs come into the community so they can hire more police officers, so they can create more prisons, and they can put more black men into jail, or we can get them addicted to drugs. And we don't ever have to worry about competition. We don't ever have to worry about our children competing with their children, because their children grow up without fathers, their mothers are strung out on drugs, and they'll never make it. Statistically, they'll never make it. And our children get to go to Ivy League schools, Ivy League colleges. You understand? Yeah, you got to understand how this works, man. This is a whole movement, man. This ain't just some. This is a whole movement, man. This is not just So many of these fathers, were not allowed to even be in the lives of their children. So I hope you guys understand now that, many black boys and girls growing up without their fathers, it wasn't just because their fathers were deadbeats. Not to mention poverty. When our mothers and fathers had problems in their marriage, they didn't have money to pay for, marriage counseling. They didn't have money to pay for that, nor did they have even a concept of that. The man just left. I mean, so many of these fathers didn't opt willingly to be absentee fathers, but were forced by sometimes unfair circumstances. Fast forward 30 years later, you immigrate to the U.S. and you judge our entire culture based upon this Eurocentric worldview that everything that is white is right. And if white people in America are somehow treating African Americans as subclass citizens, that we might just in fact be deserving of that treatment. Some of y'all believe that we deserve to be treated the way that we're treated. We deserve to be shot by the police. We deserve to be put, in prisons at alarming rates. We deserve, disproportionately. We deserve that. Many of y'all believe that we deserve that. Many of you guys believe that we deserve that. I'm not saying that there weren't fathers that, that just totally stepped out on our mothers. I know I'm rubbing some of you guys the wrong way. It's bringing up some really uncomfortable feelings, but just listen. Just listen. We have to be balanced with this. I'm telling the narrative of our culture. You understand? This is not somebody outside of our culture. I'm telling the narrative of our culture. Some fathers did just step off. But when you think about why they stepped off, was it they stepped off because they didn't want to be in the lives of their children? Maybe that's what your mother told you. Maybe that's what your mom told you, and you grew up believing that your entire life. And you never even had a conversation with your father. Your father lived right around the corner. Your father lived right up the street. You never even had a conversation with your father because your view, your biases were formulated by your mother's narratives. So the thing is that Sheikh Saeed, as well as any other imam that decides to speak on social issues, there are layers that you have to go through before you start addressing these issues, man. In such a broad way, in such a broad and callous and dismissive and insensitive way. There's a whole level. There are levels to this. This not just, oh, these people are like this. you got to dig deep and find out why these people are the way that they are. Why are their circumstances the way that they are? Otherwise, don't speak on it, because you're going to end up, here again, you're going to make a fool of yourself. Have we not seen the pattern? Have we not seen the pattern of imams and, public figures that start speaking about these issues and make huge mistakes? In addition, Sheikh Said, he said that most African Americans are the products of one-night stands. Another gross inaccuracy that paints an entire culture of people as a bunch of degenerate lowlives whose only claim to existence is illegitimate sperm that was placed in the womb of their mothers. I don't just look at the statement, I look at the implications. What are you actually implying? What are you saying here? What are you saying here? Now, our only claim to existence as African Americans, our only claim to existence is the illegitimate sperm that was placed into the wombs of our mothers. Degenerate, low-life individuals who don't even know their fathers, and who most of them are born from illegitimate sexual relations. Before I unpack this, I just want to say that we're all products of one-night stands. How long did it take for your mother to get pregnant with you? One night, right? It only took one night, right? So when you shame people and say they're all products of one-night stands, we're all products of one-night stands, actually. Right? When Sulaim, right? When Sulaim's son died, this is the mother of Anas ibn Malik, right? I'm going to give you some Islamic context, right? When Sulaim's son died, right? You know the hadith, right? Where she told nobody to tell, her husband. And then the husband came home, she cooked for him, she had sexual relations with him, and then she told him that his son died, right? Right. So they had sex that night. And in the morning, her husband went to the Prophet ﷺ to tell him what happened. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Did you guys have sexual relations last night?" And he said, "Yes." Abu Talha said, "Yes." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Barakallahu lakuma fi ghabiri laylatikuma fahamalat." The hadith mentioned, hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari, that she went to, that Abu Talha went to the Prophet ﷺ the next day, and he explained that, my son died, my wife came in, she cooked for me, she beautified herself for me, she had sexual relations with me, and then she told me that my son died. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Abu Talha, "Did you guys have sexual relations last night? Were you intimate last night?" And he said, "Yes." The Prophet ﷺ made dua. He said, "May Allah bless you in your night last night." And then the narration mentions that the few days after that, she realized she was pregnant. It only took one night for her to get pregnant. So when we shame people, we say, "Oh, they're all products of one night stands." We're all products of one night stands, man. I don't really see the shame. Because basically what you're saying, let me unpack what he's saying. The deeper implication here is that African Americans are a byproduct of random sexually gratifying escapades between men and women who have no self-control. No plans of being mothers and fathers, just out randomly having sex, right? No plan to be a nuclear family, no plans at all. You're just products of one-night stands, right? And therefore, and the deeper implication here is that because he was talking to, I believe he was in Kenya when he gave the khutbah, so he's talking to pretty much his people. He's basically saying that Somali women, basically shaming Somali women, as he has been accused of doing that often, shaming Somali women, that they should be ashamed of themselves for even entertaining a relationship with a man from an African American culture. That's basically what you're saying. The deeper implication here is that Somali women should be ashamed to even consider or entertain a relationship with people from this type of culture. How dare you? So let me say, yes, there are plenty of children in the African American community born out of wedlock. Here again, the appropriate term to use is not born from zina, fornication, and adultery, but children that are born out of wedlock. That is the politically correct way to say that, right? There are plenty of children in the African American community that are born out of wedlock. Absolutely. And yeah, to that point, like if Somali women like African American men, just like most women like African American men, white women have been loving African American men for the longest. You know what I mean? Like this is why they used to, you know, cut the, you know, the private part of the slave. You know, when they wanted to, they castrated him. You know, this is always, you know, what they call penis envy. You know what I mean? Um, and you have other cultures that have it as well. I've been to Arab communities, and you know they're very overprotective. You know, when an African American man come around and he carries himself with some type of dignity or whatever, they get very insecure. Very, very. I lived in Saudi Arabia for many years. I have never seen a more race of insecure men in my life. In my life, in my entire life, very insecure. You know, not all of them, but many of them. You know what I mean? And it's not our fault that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala created African American men with this aura, this, you know, this aura that attracts. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we can't help that. So you're gonna shame us in front of your women, so your women, you know, we look as distasteful as possible. And what you end up doing is creating more of an attraction. You know, my wife put a post out on her Facebook page. She said, may every Somali woman that is single find herself an African American man, marry an African American man. Allahumma ameen. You know, I mean, like it's you know, it reminds me of something that Tupac said in one of his rhymes a long time ago. He said, "If we so inferior, then why do you fear us? If we so inferior and you paint us in this horrible manner, what are you afraid of? Allow what is natural to dictate the way." You know what I mean? Like if we inferior, we're a bunch of degenerates, we're a bunch of low lives and, you know, individuals, then allow people to discover that on their own. Why do you have to go so hard in trying to smear our honor, our reputation? You know what I mean? And that's one of the five things what Sheikh Yusuf Rios mentioned. One of the things that we need to survive as human beings is honor and dignity. And you took that away from us. And in the eyes of the people, you tried to strip us of that. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We have honored the children of Adam. He didn't say white men from the children of Adam, Somali men from the children of Adam. He said, we have honored we have honored the children of Adam. Every single culture, every single ethnic group has to have some level of dignity that gives them their standing, their foothold in society. And you want to take that away from us. God damn, like, I mean, what else can be taken away from us? You stripped us of we were stripped of our names, stripped of our languages, stripped of our cultures, stripped of our history. And now we fast forward 400 and some odd years later, we got Muslims who migrate to America and try to strip us of our dignity, even within the freaking Muslim community. Damn, like what else do y'all want from us? You want us to just completely disappear? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I mean, like, it's just really ridiculous that even in the Muslim community, there's still this push to discredit African Americans and African American culture. This is still a push. Like, what is it that y'all fear about us? Why are you so afraid? You know, yeah, it's not our fault that, you know, women from other cultures find us handsome, find us smart and intelligent. Meanwhile, you got some hating behind individual from another culture talking about, oh, you married this black man. Does he even know his mother? Does he even know his father? It's like, man, freak out of here with that, man. Nobody want to hear that, man. Get out of here. What are you afraid of? What are you scared of? White people have been doing this to us for generations. What are you afraid of? If you're smarter than we are, if you're more financially stable than we are, then why the redlining? Why can't we get houses in certain neighborhoods? Why can't we get loans to start small businesses? Why can't we have access the way that other cultures have access? Why is it Hispanics come to America and they get jobs, they get, they get loans from the bank and they get houses and homes, and meanwhile we're still here? And then that gives you guys the privilege to sit back and say, well, my family migrated here from Pakistan, or my family came here from, Tunisia, or my family came here from Jordan, and they build a business off of their backs or whatever the case. You had help. We gets no help. On top of the fact that we still got our own self-hating Negroes to deal with, crabs in the barrel. Every single time one managed to get to the top, you got everyone trying to pull them back down. We got too many obstacles, man. We got too many obstacles. Subhanallah al-Azim, man. So, yes, there are plenty of children amongst African Americans who are born out of wedlock. Plenty. Not all, but plenty. However, there are plenty born out of wedlock for reasons that, we don't necessarily understand, and getting on the minbar and saying, they're children of zina, what I mean? It's just, here again, very, reckless with your words, very disrespectful, very insensitive, demoralizing, humiliating, and outright, demeaning to an entire group of people. Such a horrible way to define an entire culture, most of whom make up the majority of the new converts to Islam, that you should be addressing. That you should be addressing, But let me tell you why, many in the African American community are born with, born out of wedlock. The plight to separate the African American man and the African American woman goes back to antebellum slavery. Slaves in America, our ancestors, many of our ancestors, used to have to get married in secret. Did you know that? It was illegal for slaves to get married. You understand? Do you guys follow me? It was illegal because marriage was seen as a civil right, and slaves didn't have any rights. And so they used to do exactly, Zing, they used to do what is a process called jumping the broom. Jumping the broom was also kind of depicted in the movie Roots. And maybe it'll probably do you guys some justice to go back and look at the movie Roots or read the book Roots. It was illegal for slaves to get married. Even though they were slaves under the conditions that they were under, they still wanted to be moral and get married. They still wanted to be moral and get married. And so they used to get married in secret in a process called jumping the broom, which is basically a wedding ceremony for slaves. And, here again, Caucasians jump in the mix, right? Jump in the mix. And in Britain, it was called the broomstick marriage, and it was deemed non-legally binding. So they had to come up with a legal way to make it illegal, as they do everything else. So in Britain, they called it the broomstick marriage. And they deemed it wasn't legally binding, meaning any black person or any white person, because you had white people who was doing that as well. It wasn't just blacks, but also whites as well, because some of their families, maybe they didn't want them. So, for them, it would have been considered eloping. It was considered eloping for them. But for blacks, we weren't even allowed to get married. Did you guys know that? I'm just boggled when you get on the minbar and say that these children they're born out of zina, they don't even know who their fathers is. Like, do you even know the history of these people who you're talking about? Do you even know their history? And I mean, some of us could use a history lesson or two as African Americans. So slave marriages were not even recognized during slavery because, according to the law, marriages was a civil contract, and civil contracts required for the consent of free people, and slaves were not free people. So in many African American communities, people don't really get married, and some kind of just settle with one another, which is called a civil marriage. A common law marriage, where many of our parents, maybe they didn't legally get married, go to the courts and legally get married, just like many of us as Muslims are not legally married by the courts, but we got married in the masjid. What would make jumping the broom for slaves who were not allowed to get married legally, what would make jumping the broom for slaves any different than going to the masjid to marry a woman or marry a second wife or a third wife or whatever the case may be because I wasn't able to do it legally? You have many Muslims in many cultures who don't go to the, to the court and get married legally. They get married in the masjid. And I mean, it's not, in some instances, it's not even recognized. That shahada, that marriage certificate that comes from the imam, in many instances, is not even recognized as a legal form of marriage. So in our culture, in our culture, you have what is called common law marriage, where if two people have been together for a certain amount of time, 7 years, 6 years, it differs from state to state. But, they would be considered married. They would be considered married. So for you to get on the minbar and say most of these children are born out of zina, our mothers and fathers, my mother and father were never legally married, but my mother and father were together for years. And so even according to common law marriage, they would have been considered married. So it's not, and then you got African Americans who co-signing that bull crap. Yeah, my parents never got married. How long was your parents together? They were long enough to make you. Did your father split soon as you were born? No, he might have hung around for a little bit or whatever the case may be. Years and years went by. You got brothers and sisters. You got siblings that came along from that situation. And you sitting here co-signing this bull crap because you ignorant as hell of your own culture. It's really sad, man. Sad to see African Americans co-signing, disparaging comments about their own freaking culture. There's no greater representation of self-hatred than that. Self-hating Negroes, man, you gotta be kidding me, man. So the fact of the matter is that maybe many of our parents were not legally married. But common law marriage, you know what I mean? Common law marriage is recognizable in our states, in many states. In New Jersey, which is where I'm from, I believe it's 7 years. Common law marriage. They are considered legally married. It's just really sad, man. It's just pure ignorance, man. Pure ignorance. So for all of you saying, oh, we were born out of zina, you were not born out of zina. Stop accepting that narrative. You're doing the same exact thing when you go to high school and you open your world history book, your social studies book, and there's something in there related to Aboriginal people, related to, Native Americans or related to African Americans. We just accept. Eyes wide shut. You just accept. You don't have the audacity to say, that's not true. I'm not accepting that. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and so now we have a whole day off Columbus Day. Bull, you know what? I'm not accepting that, and you're not going to force me to accept that. You can give me a million tests. I'm going to give you the same damn answer. Mark it wrong. I don't give a damn. Use a permanent marker. I don't give a damn. I'm not marking nothing right so I can get a good grade if I know that the information is inaccurate. Bull crap. What year did Christopher Columbus discover America? A, 18 such and such. B, 16 such and such. C, 15 such and such. I'm not answering that question because the question is inaccurate. The question itself, because he didn't discover America. And then you got this dumbass teacher who marked the question wrong based upon some misinformation that you were given in school because you went to college and put your mind on pause and allowed a professor to fill your mind up with all of this inaccurate information. And then you go into the public school system, continuing on with the miseducation of African Americans. I'm sorry. I ain't buying that, man. Gotta be kidding me, man. Nah, I'm not doing that, man. I work in the school. I'm a teacher myself, and sometimes I remember one time I hear I was smiling. I'm sitting in the hallway during my prep period, and I'm grading some papers, and I could hear the other classroom, the doors open, and there was a young Egyptian kid in the classroom, and the teacher said, "Oh, you're from Egypt, so you're Egyptian." He said, "No, I'm African American." He said, "Because I'm Egyptian, but I was born in America, so I'm African American." The teacher's like, "No, you're not African American." He said, "No, I'm African American." I'm like, yes. Kid understands, he gets it. One of my students. I love this dude, man. You know what I mean? But he gets it. You understand? And his father gets it. He said, "No, my parents are from Egypt, but I was born in America, so technically I'm an African American." And his skin is just as pale, you know what I mean? But he's clear about his identity. Clear about his identity. So when you see someone, and the fact that Sheikh Saeed, as well as Hamza Yusuf and many others who have uttered, such, egregious comments about African Americans, the reason why they can say these things about us is because they don't see us as an extension of themselves, right? When Somalis, when, East Africans, West Africans, when they come, you understand? When they come to America, they don't identify with us. They don't see us as an extension of themselves. And when you see someone as an extension of yourself, there's a degree of compassion and mercy and, understanding, as well as a sense of overprotectiveness, overprotection of them, because you see them as an extension of yourself. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, pay attention. When you see someone as an extension of yourself, there's a level of overprotection that you have of them. There's a level of, compassion and love and mercy that you have for them because you see them as an extension of yourself. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Fatima tu bid'atun minni, wa man agdabaha yughdibuni wa aghdabani, wa ma yu'dhiha yu'dhini." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Fatima is a part of me. You understand? Fatima is a part of me. And what hurts her hurts me. That's what happens when you see someone as an extension of yourself. Somalis don't come to America, and many, because I know some very beautiful Somalis, men who, will go to bat for you. And you know what I mean? Like, they stand in solidarity with African Americans. I know that. Many, but you have many who come, especially the uncles and the aunties, the older generation. They come here and they don't identify with us. They don't identify with our struggles. They don't see us as an extension of themselves, evidenced by the fact that you sever ties from us. You know what I mean? You sever ties from us. When you see someone as an extension of yourself, there's a level of protection. Let me bring them in. Somalis, alhamdulillah, I respect the fact that you come here, you pull your resources together within your own networks, and you build Masjid, you build duksi, you know what I mean? Like, you're teaching the Quran, wallahi, much respect. But you don't go after pulling the young African Americans in, because honestly, in many of the Indo-Pak Arab communities, we don't belong, man. We don't fit in. We don't. We stand out like sore thumbs, man. Just on the nature of our skin color, skin complexion, and the way that we dress. They see us dressed, come in. Sometimes I come in a Masjid with jeans on, and if the person doesn't know who I am, they don't even give me the salams. Meanwhile, I teach your child. Your child is one of my students. Wallah al-Azim, I kid you not. Some of the parents, so detached, never came in and had a meeting with me, don't even know who the child's Islamic studies teacher is. Sometimes I'll go to the Masjid, I'm dressed like I'm dressed now, and they'll walk right past you, won't even give me the salams. It's just like, I teach your son in my class. You got to be kidding me. This is a joke. Just on the strength of the way that we are dressed. Just on the strength of the way that we talk. You know what I mean? But we don't get pulled in. We don't get pulled in to be made to feel comfortable. You don't have to go to this masjid or that masjid to be made to feel uncomfortable. You are always welcome in our communities. The doors are always open. You understand? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said that comment to Ali, his own cousin, Fatima's husband, when he wanted to marry a second wife, and he saw how bothered she was by that, and he went to Ali and he said, Fatima bid'atu minni. Fatima is a part of me. Wa yu'dhini ma adaha, and what harms her harms me. What harms her harms me. That's when you see somebody as an extension of yourself. Children being born out of wedlock is a dilemma and a challenge that every society fears. At one time or another. And, and every, society is, you know what I mean, faced with, the plethora of reasons that stem from poverty, ignorance, low morale based upon, social marginalization and systematic oppression, it's or just human error. You know what I mean? That's not something that we get on the minbar and we shame people for. We don't get on the minbar on Friday, on Jumu'ah, the best of all days, and shame a whole entire race of people for, being born out of wedlock without considering the circumstances and the situations in which that has created that problem. People are born out of wedlock sometimes due to poverty. Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, "Lo kana al-faqru rajulan laqataltuhu," that if poverty was a man, I would kill him, because poverty makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. Number two, ignorance. People just ignorant. Number three, low morale, when a person doesn't really care about themselves and doesn't care about, the greater scope of, their lives. They just make reckless decisions. And then some people just human error. Being born, I mean, there were many that were born out of wedlock during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Were they not? Were they not people that were born out of wedlock who, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation, these individuals became adults and converted to Islam? I'm going to prove to you. I'm going to prove to you. I don't say nothing except I give you dalil. I'm not that person. All right. But, there are a plethora of reasons that a person, being born out of wedlock, it's not just simply the result of unbridled desire for sexual gratification. For if that were the case, as implied by, Sheikh Said's comment, then it would make them a culture of degenerate savages. And what does it say about our women? What does it say about our women if we are a nation of people that are born out of zina? Well, what does this say? What is the deeper implication about women, black women? What are you saying about black women? They just sleep around with anybody? They just sleep, black women, they just sleep with anybody? Here again, black women is always on the chopping block, man. We're always coming for our women. I'm sorry. Buck stops here. You're not coming for ours, man. You're not coming for our women. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. Black women, more than anything, they carry this culture on their shoulders. You understand? And I'd be damned if I allow anybody to imply, or indicate, something being, inherently wrong with our women. Our women have carried this culture, man, from generations. You understand? And any man, who hears a comment like that, like, you have to think about, like, what are the deeper implications? What are you saying? If we are a nation of people that are born out of fornication and adultery, what are you saying about our women? What does that say about the black woman? Right? Children being born out of wedlock was a challenge that even existed pre-Islam. And this means that there were individuals who embraced Islam, who essentially became companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who were products of poor decisions of their parents, possibly influenced by the prevalence of ignorance in their society, i.e., as Sheikh Said said, products of fornication and adultery. When you say you are a product of fornication and adultery, zina in Islam, fornication and adultery in Islam is despicable. It's a heinous crime. It is one of the worst sins, the most serious of sins in Islam. And to refer to a person's origin as a child of zina, meaning your origin of existence is a foul, heinous sin, is no different than Christians saying that you were born in sin. No different. You understand? It's no different than Christians saying you were born in sin. Now you have Muslims saying, "Oh, you born out of zina." Zina in Islam is a haram, is one of the gravest sins, heinous sins, hated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're now attributing a person's origin of existence from this particular sin. La wallahi, man, you dead wrong, man. Dead wrong, man. You wrong on levels that exceed explanation. You are wrong on levels that exceed explanation, man. Serious. I really hope that you take a deep look at, your comments, man. However, the Prophet ﷺ never got on the minbar. never got on the minbar and condemned people who were, as Sheikh Saeed put it, products of zina. Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, the hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari, gave us a very vivid depiction of what pre-Islamic Arab culture looked like as it relates to the relationship between husband and wife. I'm almost done. As it relates to the relationship between husband and wife. Hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Aisha, she said, أن الزواج في الجاهلية كان على أربعة أنحاء. That marriage or male-female relations were 4 types prior to Islam. 4 types. I want you, this is Aisha giving us a clear depiction of what pre-Islamic Arab culture looked like. Because we don't do history, right? We don't do history. So therefore, that is a big part of connecting all of the dots and trying to find out where we fit in this beautiful religion. We can't find out where we fit in because we don't know where it started. We don't know how to make the connections. We have yet to connect the dots. Aisha said that in pre-Islamic Arab culture, male and female relations were 4 types. She said the first, منها نكاح الناس اليوم يخطب الرجل إلى الرجل وليته أو ابنته فيصدقها ثم ينكحها. The first type is the type of marriage that we have in Islam today, where a man proposes to another man for his daughter or for a girl that he is responsible for, his niece, his, whoever he's responsible for. He gives her a dowry and then he marries her. That was the first type. So that did exist in pre-Islam. So Islam did not come with marriage. Arabs were getting married, were in the habit or the tradition of marriage pre-existing even before Islam. She said, so the first type of relationship between men and women was the type of relationships that we have now in Islam, and that was where a man proposes to another man for his daughter, gives her a dowry, and then marries her. She said the second type of pay attention, the second type of male-female relationships, he said, ونكاح آخر كان الرجل يقول لامرأته إذا طهرت من طمثها أرسلني إلى فلان استبدعي منه فيعتزلها زوجها ولا يمسها أبدا حتى يتبين حملها من ذلك الرجل. The second type of male-female relations is where a man would be in a relationship with a woman. However, this man was not able to produce a child. This would be what they call polyandry, right? Where a woman has multiple male partners. That existed in pre-Islamic Arab culture. That wasn't considered necessarily marriage. It was a relationship. Nonetheless, she says, so a man would be in a relationship with a woman. He was not able to produce children. So when she got off of her menstrual cycle, he would say, send me to this man over here. And she would go and she would have sex with another man. And her current husband would not touch her until it became clear that she was pregnant by that man. فَإِذَا تَبَيَّنَ حَمْلُهَا أَصَابَهَا زَوْجُهَا. And when she found out she was pregnant by the other man, then and only then would the husband be able to have sexual relations with her. وإذا أحب وإنما يفعل ذلك رغبة في نجابة الولد فكان نكاح الاستبضاع. That the man would resume sexual relations with his wife until she gave birth to that other man's child. And she did this because she was seeking a child. That was pre-Islamic Arab culture, right? Polyandry. She said, nikahun akhar, another type of relationship between men and women. يجتمع رهط دون العشرة فيدخلون على المرأة كلهم فيصيبها. Aisha said, the third type of relationship between man and woman is where a group of multiple men would have sex with one woman. Less than 10, not exceeding 10. But all of these men would have relations with this one woman. كلهم يصيبها. All of them would have sexual relations with her. فإذا حملت ووضعت ومر عليها الليال بعد أن تضع حملها أرسلت إليهم فلم يستطيع رجل منهم أن يمتنع. That once she delivered the child, once she delivered the baby, she would call all of the men that had sex with her back, and then she would point out one randomly and say, the child is yours, and he would not have a right to stop. He would not have a right to stop that process. He would have to consent to it, meaning more than one man, up to, no more than 10, would have sexual relations with the same woman. Because she knew that having multiple partners of this magnitude, the chances of getting pregnant would be greater rather than having sexual relations with one particular man. Here again, we're all born from a one-night stand. But you would never say that of any of the Sahaba. You would never say that. You would never even think to say that about something that went on pre-Islam. But it existed. And many of those people were some of the great Sahaba that we know today. Many of them. Aisha wasn't speaking, hundreds of years before the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. She's speaking current Islamic culture prior to the Prophet ﷺ receiving revelation. This was going on in their society prior to the Prophet ﷺ receiving revelation. I'm using this to show that this dynamic exists in every single culture, but we always single out African Americans as if we are an anomaly with degeneracy and savagery. I want you guys to take a look at yourselves, man. Take a look at your own cultures and stop with this, this duplicitous behavior that you come in front of us like you the most picture perfect culture. Meanwhile, you're shaming us for being African Americans to the point where many African Americans don't even know who the hell they want to be. We convert to Islam and we completely disassociate ourselves from our culture. Why? Because you guys have shamed us so much. You have made our culture look so distasteful that when an African American converts to Islam, he automatically wants to disassociate himself from his own culture. We do what's called cultural apostasy. You understand? So here it is, this woman has sexual relations with up to 10 men. 10 men. And then once she delivers the child, does she know who the father is? Exactly. No, she doesn't. She randomly selects, she calls all of those men back, she randomly selects, you are the father. And because he agreed to that process, he doesn't even have a right to object. He doesn't have a right to object. حتى يجتمعوا عندها تقول لهم قد عرفتم الذي كان من أمركم وقد ولدت فهو ابنك يا فلان وتسمي من أحبت باسمه فيلحق به ولدها ولا يستطيع أن يمتنع به الرجل. And that was that. Whose name does the child get? The child gets the name of the man that she selected randomly. That was the deal. I'll have sexual relations with all of you guys, and when I get pregnant, I will decide which one of you is the father, and you don't have a right to refuse. You understand? Aisha said number 4. The fourth, which was just basically prostitution. Al-Baghaya, prostitution. كنا ينصبن على أبوابهن رايات تكون علما. That these women, they used to put little flags on their windows to indicate to the men in the society. This is pre-Islam, right before the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. Hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari. You ask me no questions, I tell you no lies. Ask you no questions, I tell you. You ask me no questions, I tell you no lies. This was pre-Islamic Arab society. She said the fourth type of relationship was al-baghaya, prostitution. And this is where women would hang flags in their windows to indicate to men going by that she was available. And the men would go and sleep with them or whatever the case may be, which still exists today. Aisha, she ended the hadith by saying, فَلَمَّا بُعِثَ مُحَمَّدٌ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ بِالْحَقِّ هَدَمَ نِكَاحَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ كُلَّهُ إِلَّا نِكَاحَ النَّاسِ الْيَوْمِ. Aisha said, anha, she said, and when the Prophet, this shows you that this lasted all the way up until the time that the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. She said, when the Prophet ﷺ was sent as a messenger, he destroyed all of these previous relationships between males and females, And the only thing that Islam acknowledges or recognizes is the type of marriage that people do today, where a man goes to another man to propose. So, as you can see, even pre-Islamic Arab culture had its share of debauchery and immorality. And the Prophet ﷺ never shamed the Arabs for doing this. He never shamed them. He never said, oh, you guys in Jahiliyyah, y'all were doing this. He understood the ignorance of the people. Why can't we just accept that some people are just inherently ignorant and don't know any better? Some people are driven by, poverty. As you can see, they were prostitutes. They were selling themselves. The Prophet ﷺ even mentioned in a hadith of the prostitute who, went down and got a dog, something, and Sheikh Saeed actually mentioned that hadith in his khutbah, which I believe was a great khutbah on polygyny. It was a great khutbah on polygyny until he got to this one place. And you feeling yourself, the dopamine levels are high, and you just allow what was genuine, natural, just to come out of your mouth. And now you're dealing with the repercussions of that. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ, what he did was he clarified what was acceptable according to Islamic standards, and he tried to make the pre-Islamic culture of immorality look as distasteful as possible without making them feel shamed for their customs. He never made them feel shame. Why do y'all do that to us as African Americans? You make us feel ashamed to even be African Americans. Meanwhile, your children, Pakistani children, Indian children, Desi children, Arab children, you all walking around with Adidas sweatsuit on, and Adidas, you walking around with Yeezys on, the latest rap music or whatever the case may be. But when an African American comes into the masjid, you shame us. You look down upon us with such disdain to separate us from our own culture. Meanwhile, your children have embraced everything about our culture. Every single thing about our culture, you guys have embraced. Down to the music, down to the movies, down to the dress, down to the language. But us as African Americans, nope, we are still deplorable. We are still deplorable in your sight. But yet your children have taken on our entire culture. Our culture right now is what gives your children relevance. Our children right now is what gives your children relevance. This is what makes your children feel like they belong to something. They belong to African American culture. Meanwhile, you have shamed us for being African Americans. And that's a fact. And I'm sorry. If I make you uncomfortable, you got to live in that uncomfortable space. You got to live in that discomfort, because I'll be damned if I change who I am. I'll be damned if I change how I talk. I'll be damned if I change my dress. I'm still going to wear Timbs. I'm still going to wear jeans. I'm still going to wear a baseball cap if I decide to. I'm still going to wear polo. I'm still going to wear Gucci. Well, not Gucci, but I'm still going to dress the way my culture dictates. The Prophet ﷺ never came into a society of people and made them change their dress. The Prophet ﷺ never changed his dress. What do you think he wore when he became the Messenger of Allah ﷺ? You think he changed his dress? He wore the same clothes that he used to wear prior to him becoming a prophet. Yet we are shamed for not coming in the masjid wearing a kufi. The Prophet ﷺ never wore a kufi. I'm sorry. The Prophet ﷺ never wore. Why is it okay for you to buy Adidas, for your children, to buy hoodies for your children, to buy Yeezys for your children? But yet when you see an African American come into the masjid wearing the same thing that you bought for your children, you automatically assume he's a thug. Why can your children wear it and they're fine, but when you see an African American wearing it, you clutch in your pocketbook, you don't want to give salams because you just automatically assume that we just some degenerate race of lowlives. Gotta be kidding me, man. This has to be a joke. And then we sitting around talking about one ummah. You gotta be kidding me. And so when we go back to Aisha's statement, some of those individuals converted to Islam. When the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet, some of them converted to Islam, right? And they were born in that culture and eventually accepted Islam. And when they embraced Islam, they were forgiven for their past errors. So when you say that we were born from zina, we were forgiven. We've forgiven that. Why you got to remind us on the minbar about something that our parents did that we had no control over? We were forgiven for that. We didn't share in that. we don't share in the sin of our parents. Our parents were ignorant. They made some mistakes or whatever the case may be. And you got to remind us of that. You got to give a khutbah and speak to a whole different culture, shaming an entirely different culture who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave them for that. Gotta be kidding me, man. Occasionally, the remnants of pre-Islamic Arab culture with respect to immorality reared its ugly head. There are a number of hadith that deal with the Prophet ﷺ dealing with people who committed zina. There was a woman from, the tribe of Ghamidiyya who, the Ghamidiyya hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, where she committed zina and she had a baby from that. And then the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba stoned her to death and asked one of the Sahaba to take that child. That child later on became one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Did he not? And he was a child born of zina, right in the Prophet ﷺ's community. The Prophet ﷺ gave that child to one of the Sahaba to look after, and they stoned her to death. You understand? That child being raised by one of the Sahaba, eventually became a companion himself. But the Prophet ﷺ dealt with those individuals with compassion, with understanding. I think I kind of made my point. I don't want to keep, belaboring the point. I think I kind of made my point.